Morning, everybody. I don't know how Rick did not get the memo. I sent the memo. I don't know why you didn't get the memo. So just before I get started on the message, I just wanted to draw your attention over to our prayer wall. This has been a feature in our worship space for years, but it just got a facelift. Thank you, Libby Bauman, and those who worked with her. And the reason for that is we are in a season where we're calling our congregation to be praying. It's an important thing always, but specifically at times when we are either taking on some new initiative or some great challenge that we want to make sure that we're all kind of praying together as a community of faith. So we're in this season where we're in the midst of transition. So we have a new lead pastor that will be starting with us, James Lee, on July 1st. And so through that time of transition, we want to be praying into that. But it's also a time where we're focused on the future. Where is God leading us as a community of faith going forward? And so we want to make sure that we are focused on prayer, asking God for direction and for insight and for discerning minds and hearts. And so with the prayer wall, you can go over and you can list a prayer. You can write out a prayer, either a personal prayer for yourself or someone you care about, or you can write a prayer for the church. In addition, we have a bi-monthly, twice a month email that we're going to be sending out starting at the middle of February. And they will be a prayer focus for something specific around the transition, around the future, the ministries of hope. And so we're asking you to sign up for that prayer email. We're not sending it to everybody. We want to send it to folks who are saying, yeah, I want to be praying into this as well. We already have about 300 Hope folks who are signed up. So if you haven't had a chance, I want to encourage you to do that. You can go to the Today page, meethope.org/today, and you can find where to sign up for that prayer email. Twice a month, we'll be sending those out. So please be praying for this church that we all love so much and is so important to us. And so that's my little promotion there. We are, as Pastor Rick just said, at the conclusion of this series based on Micah chapter 6, verse 8. And the irony is not lost on me that I am speaking about humility when the Eagles are in the Super Bowl. I know that hours from now, you're going to be sitting, many of you are going to be sitting in front of TV sets saying things like, I can't stand the Kansas City Chiefs. Mahomes is awful. The refs are terrible. Right? I know what that's going to be for you. So I was thinking, what would a humble way of approaching the Super Bowl sound like? Would it sound like this? Would it sound like, it really doesn't matter who wins. We just want both teams to have fun. Right? There's a vote against. Or would it sound like, I wish our defense would be nicer to Mahomes. They've been so rough on him. Saquon, you've scored enough touchdowns. Let somebody else have the ball for a change, all right? So let me just say, in all humility, I hope the Chiefs play a good game and the Eagles crush them. Oh, yeah, nothing like sucking up. Here's the thing. Humility is not a lack of passion or strong conviction. I want to say that again. Humility is not a lack of passion or strong conviction. In Hebrews, in Micah 6:8, The Hebrew word that is translated humility in our Bible is the Hebrew word sana. And that word literally means to be mild and to lack arrogance. To be mild or to be lacking in arrogance. You know, one of the best ways to describe something or define something is to say what it isn't, right? So humility is not arrogance. It lacks arrogance. There is no arrogance in humility. So what is arrogance then? The definition of arrogance is an overinflated sense of one's own importance or abilities that often leads to a disrespectful, dismissive behavior toward others. And when I read what arrogance sounds like, you know who that makes me think of? You know who that reminds me of? Me. I can act in arrogant ways, right? I can be at times so confident in what I think or believe that I refuse to listen to anybody else and think that anybody who sees it differently, who thinks about it differently, must be an idiot or a fool, right? If I'm being completely honest. So arrogance can creep in to anyone's life at times. So, when I'm at my most arrogant place, I'm not listening, I'm not interested in somebody's understanding or experience that's different than my own. I think I'm right, which makes me superior, right? And makes me dismissive of anybody who has a different point of view. I don't want to hear it. So when I got called into ministry, I knew that that meant I had to go to seminary in order to be ordained, and I didn't want to go to seminary. Why would I go to seminary? I've read the Bible for years. I went to a Christian university. I knew what I believed. I knew what the Bible said. And I just wanted to get in and start doing ministry. I didn't want to waste time at seminary. My wife, Marilyn, recounts the story that during that time when I was whining about having to go to seminary and we were engaged to be married, and I said to this woman who I was engaged to, you know, 3 years is a really long commitment. To which I'm sure she said, oh, really? All right. Here's what happened, though. By the end of that first year of seminary, I was really confused about what I believed and about things that I thought I knew. I was in classes with professors who loved the Bible so much that they dedicated their lives to the study of it, who read it in its original languages, who got into the historical elements of it and the cultural things going on and had an understanding so superior to my own, and came to different conclusions, different understandings in some cases than what I had. And I was so confused. And I wasn't alone in that. Many of those men and women that I was in classes with were going through that same kind of confusion, that same kind of, whoa, I thought I knew all of this stuff, and now I'm getting this new information from people who bring these different perspectives and understandings. And we would talk about that after class and into the night. it was a challenge, right? At the end of 3 years of seminary, I came out of that experience far more clear about what I believed and how I understood things because of that experience. My understanding and my appreciation for other perspectives from people who were teaching things that I hadn't known before. People who had different experiences than me, came from different backgrounds, theological backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, racial backgrounds, economic backgrounds, who brought different perspectives into the scriptures that helped inform my own understanding. But it was through listening to them, through the experience of being in that setting and listening and engaging with that my own understanding grew and matured. So it turns out that the biggest lesson I learned in 3 years of seminary was humility. Humility. I learned to listen and to appreciate others in ways that I never imagined before I went. So, Micah 6:8. Micah 6:8 says, "The Lord has shown you, O mortal, what is good." God shows us the good way. God shows us his way, the good way. And what does the Lord require? Not suggest, but require. What does the Lord require of you? And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It is you singular. Micah's not talking to a crowd. He's not talking to a nation. He's not talking to a government. He's not talking to a system. He's talking to you as an individual, to me as an individual. What does the Lord require of you? To do justice. To do justice. We talked a couple of weeks ago about justice, right? That word justice, when you boil it down, when you go to the original language, it's about fairness and equity and impartiality. That I treat people with fairness, equity, and impartiality. Not just people who look like me, who agree with me. That's not justice, that's just us. Justice is when I do that for all people. Do justice. And then last week, Pastor Rick talked about loving mercy, love mercy. And talked about that loving mercy is how we express it to an individual that we see in need. But beyond that, it's addressing systems that may hurt people, may discriminate against people, that we come against systems like that, and that we deal with injustice and a lack of mercy in our own lives, and do the inner reflection and introspection on where I might be missing the boat on mercy in my life. And then it ends with, walk humbly with your God. Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. When I read those words, the picture that comes into my mind is that I'm walking down the street side by side with Jesus, right? Because Jesus is God incarnate. Jesus is the one that helps me to understand who the God of the universe is in a way that is relatable, right? Jesus is God incarnate. And so when I'm walking humbly with God, I picture myself walking down the street with Jesus. Now, can you imagine walking down the street with Jesus, Jesus who knows all about you, right? Knows your past, knows your thoughts, knows the sin in your life, knows the ways that you fall short, as well as the wonderful things about you, knows all about you. Can you imagine walking down the street with Jesus and saying to Jesus, I'm better than that guy, right? I'm better than those people, right? And Jesus going, darn right. Right? Does that make sense? Of course not. The reality is, Jesus lived a Micah 6:8 life. Jesus taught and Jesus modeled humility. And so as I learn about Jesus, as I listen to Jesus, as I walk with Jesus, I am learning the lessons of what humility, a life of humility, looks like. See, in all of those cases, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly, it's active. It's not about what you believe, it's about what you do. And so we're called to model Jesus as he's modeling humility in his life. Jesus taught about it, right? In Matthew chapter 5, verse 5, in the Sermon on the Mount and the opening of that sermon in the Beatitudes, Jesus in Matthew 5:5 says, God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth. He blesses those who are humble. All right? God rewards us when we live lives of humility. There's a remarkable story about humility in John's Gospel, the 13th chapter. And I remember the first time that this really struck me. I've read it many times before, but the first time that this part really struck me, it was about 10 years ago. It's John 13, verse 3. This is what it says. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power. Think about that. There is a moment in time where Jesus knew that God had put all things under his power. He is literally the most powerful man on the planet. What would you do in that moment? What would I do in that moment? Here's what Jesus did. He took off his outer garment. He put a towel around his waist. He filled a basin with water. And he knelt at the feet of his disciples and he washed their feet. Wow. The most powerful man on the planet. And he's washing feet. And when he's done with that, he turns to those disciples and he says, you know, you call me teacher and Lord, and that's right, because that's what I am. I am your teacher and I am your Lord. So if I, your teacher and your Lord, wash your feet, how much more should you wash each other's feet? If I humble myself, Jesus is saying, how much more should you humble yourselves? You are to walk humbly with your God. Humility is not about being powerless, right? That's what this story tells us. Humility is not about being powerless or lacking knowledge. Humility is making the choice to use your power and to use your knowledge to serve and to bless others, particularly those who are struggling the most. That's the nature of humility. Now, it's Super Bowl Sunday, so I figured I have to have a football illustration, right? Fortunately, Pastor Rick's not preaching because, the whole memo thing. So, every year they give an award that the NFL describes as its most prestigious award. It's the NFL's Walter Payton Man of the Year Award. And it's given to one of the players who demonstrates excellence on the field and off the field. And it's named after Walter Payton. And for those of you who are not football fans, Walter Payton was one of the greatest NFL players. He was a running back for the Chicago Bears back when they were good. Sorry, Sean and Bill and Bears fans. He was amazing, right? He was a phenomenal running back. Not just a great running back, but one of the greatest players of all time. And Walter Payton, as both a player and after his playing career, the way he was described by people who knew him was he is generous and he is humble. He is generous and he is humble. He did things in the community to serve children and things that he was passionate about. He was all in on those things, not just, as a thing that he felt like he had to do. He was really into helping other people and using his gifts and his talents and so forth to help as many people as he could. I read a story about Walter that what he used to do after practice, all the other players, they'd come in, they were a sweaty mess and so forth, and they'd strip off their uniforms and just throw them on the floor and take showers and throw their towels on the floor. The locker room would be a mess, and as the other players were leaving, Walter Payton would hang out with the custodians and clean up the locker room, wipe down the equipment. And after that happened a couple of times, one of the custodians said that he finally said, "Why are you doing, you're Walter Payton, why are you doing this?" And Payton answered, "Because it needs to be done." Right? Why wouldn't I do that? His power made him a great player. His humility made him a great man. So Philippians chapter 2, verses 3 and 4 says this: "Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. Don't look only for your own interests, but take an interest in others too." Arrogance says, "I'm better than other people," and therefore dismisses them, insults them. Humility says, "I'm no better than anybody else. How can I serve them?" That passage then, Philippians chapter 2, goes on to describe Jesus, and it says this: "Your attitude should be the same as that of Jesus Christ, who being in very nature God," the most powerful man on the planet, who being in very nature God, "did not consider equality with God something to be held on to, but made himself nothing, taking on humanity, becoming a servant, even to the point of suffering a death on the cross. Jesus did that as a way to make a way for you and for me to be able to stand before a holy God. Not in our own righteousness, but made right because of his sacrifice for us. He humbled himself even to the point of death on a cross. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.